Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula has announced that the taxi industry will receive 1.1 billion rand to mitigate against the losses incurred during the COVID-19 lockdown. For more on this, I've got a reaction by SANTACO spokespersonThabisho Molelekwa on the fund of the taxi industry. Thabisho, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's just look at that announcement made by Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula, 1.1 billion rand in relief fund measures. From SANTACO's response to this announcement, how have you received it?
Well, firstly, the minister has put us in a very precarious situation because it was our expectation that you would afford us an opportunity to go and report to our constituency, who will then give us their input and we'll be able to come back to government. But that put aside, we must firstly clarify that 1.135 billion does not entirely come to the taxi industry. You still have to subtract from that amount of money that must go to meter taxis, e-hailing, and so on and so on. So the 5,000 that the minister refers to, we don't think in terms of our calculation that's the money that will go to the operator. The money that will go ultimately to the operator is about between 2.5 and 3.5. Because there's money for the driver that must be subtracted and money that must go to the queue marshal. So we completely unsatisfied, and precisely because we thought we would be given an opportunity to propose alternatives on how best this matter can be handled going forward.
So speaking about the unsatisfactory response from your end, I mean, what is your plan going forward? There were quite a lot of demands and concerns highlighted from SANTACO, including the issue of capacity, the times, and also, just some of the more stringent regulations that SANTACO had been adhering to during this lockdown period.
We must give it to the minister, the issue of a reopening of long distance operation, which is agreeable to the issue of loading capacity to 100%, which is also equally agreeable to. And now that put aside, the challenge still remains that we need to deal with. But it is also important that we clarify to the public that the government qualification process to access the relief as stipulated by the minister, it is still a subject of discussion between government and SANTACO in as far as what do we agree on as a process going forward. We are, however, concerned with the remarks of the minister that those with receipts must not be under the impression that they automatically qualify ultimately for operating license. We feel it is unfair, it is discriminatory, because most of these people have been waiting for these operating licenses for at least a minimum of a year. So why wait a year to come and tell this guy that he does not qualify for that? And secondly is the issue of SARS. It is not correct that we do not want to comply with SARS. In fact, the question that we should be asking is, since the Act of Transport says for you to have an operating license, you must have a tax clearance certificate. If those many thousands of operators who've got operating licenses, is government suggesting that they may be having those operating licenses irregularly? Because it is our belief that those people have got tax clearance certificates which makes them compliant with SARS. So what we have suggested instead is, instead of duplicating this process, why don't you just take those who've got operating licenses, because already they qualified, already they are compliant with SARS. But let us avoid creating a cumbersome process for operators who will be discouraged because they've got to do this and this. Let's simplify that. Let's separate processes. Other processes of formalization can be entertained later.
I'm just looking at the issue of taxi fares and perhaps the unsatisfactory response on your end. I mean, is this going to impact any taxi increases based on what was announced to date?
What the minister have said today has got nothing to do with taxi fares. We have indicated that as of the 1st of July, taxi structures countrywide are open to increase fares. We've been engaging with provinces who have been interacting with us, indicating how they will, or percentages at which they will increase such fares. And I think between today and tomorrow, we will issue a statement that would break down the percentages or the increases per province. So This has got nothing to do with what the minister said. And yes, he had rightfully indicated, we did brief him. We did indicate that this taxi fare is an annual occurrence and has got nothing to do with COVID.
All right, and then Thabisho, I just want to conclude by perhaps speaking about the allocation of those resources and how the money will be utilized sufficiently, just make sure that it's used for its intended purposes. How will this process be regulated and implemented?
Well, that is within the ambit of government. I think where we will end is once we have agreed on the actual process going forward. But as the minister has indicated, there's an agency, in this case SARS within government, that will then manage the distribution of these funds. We are still going to thresh out those issues, and once we have agreed, it will really be entirely upon government on how best, or vehicles or instruments that will be used to disperse those funds and ensure that those funds reach their intended recipients.
All right, Thabisho Molelekwa, SANTACO spokesperson, let's leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, just reacting to the announcement made by Minister Fikile Mbalula earlier on, in which a 1.1 billion rand relief response fund, in fact, was announced by government to help mitigate against the losses incurred during the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course that impact it's had on the taxi industry to date.